Hello, it's Webz here again, and it's time to ignite the world with our new Hearthstone deck. This time being Fire Mage. This deck centers around Ignite, and getting it as early as possible so you can infinitely ramp up your damage throughout the game without worrying about running into fatigue. The deck's playstyle is kind of similar to that of a Miracle deck of days old, and because of that, we're running a lot of draw power within the deck. For mulligans, you want to keep a bunch of early game removal cards such as First Flame or Brain Freeze, along with some type of draw power in order to cycle through your deck quicker, thus allowing you to draw into the Ignites more commonly. With that being said, let's get into the games. Alright, time for game 1 against Druid. Here we're just going to mulligan everything besides the First Flame. And then we're going to draw into Ignite and Incanter's Flow, both of which are really good for us. But then draw into a Runic Orb. This opening hand actually is pretty great. Just going to use the orb here. It's cool how they integrated the mechanics of Fire Mage from WoW into this game with this recent set. Both Hot Streak and Ignite being a central key factor within the spec in the game. We're going to play Incanter's Flow. Should have probably played it a little bit earlier if we could have. I guess we didn't have the coin, so we couldn't have. I'm assuming they're playing Ramp Druid? Or they're playing some weird Eclipse Druid. We're going to use Primal Studies, put down our one minion, and then draw two. And then First Flame their minion. Not going to risk them buffing up it at all. They're going to use a bunch of mana cheats in their hand in order to play Nourish. It's kind of weird to try to cheat out this early. Draw into Fire Cell. Just going to play the Astromancer. And then trade the Fire Cell away and then play the Incanter's Flow. The amount of times that I've traded away Fire Cell and got exactly what I wanted off of it is amazing. I've grown to really enjoy the tradable mechanic. You're going to play a bunch of flies. We can actually board clear this, funnily enough, by wasting a bunch of resources. Which is probably the correct play to do, actually. Sure, we're at a card disadvantage at this point, but I'd rather be at a card advantage instead of staring at a board of huge minions. Since this deck definitely does not have any good way to deal with a bunch of huge minions. Minions with 2 HP or 3 HP, on the other hand, yes. I think we screwed over their game plan a little bit there. So they're trying to think of what they're going to do. We're going to play Eclipse, and then Arbor up, which we have no good way to deal with that in our hand. And we draw into Fire Cell. Of course we draw into Fire Cell. That's just great. Terrible for them, but great for us. And then next turn we can kill that last Arbor Up minion. This is the game that I'm thinking of where Astromancer was just horrible to me. I think it is. I really think it is. I'm going to play the Arcane Intellect to draw 2. And then we're going to kill off both of the minions. And play the Ignite into their face. I didn't want Greybog to stay around for a long period of time, because that could become a very tricky situation. Okay, they're going to discover a card here. Then they're going to double up on the Overgrowth, which is strange. Oh, I guess that's actually an interesting interaction. Oh, they were already at 10 mana. Yeah, that makes sense. That actually makes a lot more sense now. They're going to draw most of their deck. Then we're going to play the Astromancer. And yes, I think this is exactly the game that I was thinking it was. Yeah. I should have kept that in my hand until they had a bunch of minions out on board. That was a misplay on my behalf. The plus side is we got 2 cards out of it, though. And an 8/8 minion. I'd rather have the Prime on the board, but oh well. Would have been cool if they had supported Balanced Druid a lot more than they did. Sadly, they didn't. I think they're Ancestral Alignment, to be honest. Which is not bad for this matchup. We're going to play Springwater, draw into a bunch more cards, and then draw into a Chandelier with a bunch of discounted fire spells. And this is where it gets really, really funny. We're going to take the Lab Partner because we can just get free damage. And here we can grab a 3rd Ignite. Every Ignite that we discover is just a higher chance of us drawing into it. And we draw into our 3rd Ignite. And we can keep on board clearing and drawing more and more cards. And drawing into more Ignites. This is a perfect example why this card should have never been printed. It snowballs so damn quickly. And since we have barely any cards in our deck besides Ignite, we're just going to keep drawing into them over and over and over again. And there's nothing they can do about it. Absolutely nothing. If this was against Priest, sure, they might be able to steal our hand and our deck. But it isn't, so. And they're just going to taunt up, but that literally does nothing for them. And they don't even kill our Chandelier, which This means we can draw more ignites with our ignites. It's dumb how fast this ramps up. And I think at this point, the only cards in our deck are the actual ignites. So of course we're just going to keep drawing into them until we have no mana left. And win the game. Alright, time for game 2 against Mage. I'm assuming this is probably going to be Questline. Going to get rid of the Chandelier. This is useless in this opening hand. It's probably a card that you're never going to want to keep. Actually going to get rid of all the cards in our hand. And we draw into another Chandelier. Our hand looks actually kind of bad for this matchup. But if it is Questline, then they have no minions to target with their own spells. And if we can draw into our ignites before they can complete their quest, then we just win. I ironically think the worst matchups for Questline Mage are decks that run little to no minions. Which is probably why D6 Warlock got so popular, was because it didn't give them many targets to play their cards on. Because without your opponent having minions, you have to rely on cards that generate minions for you. Just going to play the Arcane Intellect. So the downside is we have a bunch of cards that are dead for us too. But we're kind of at a standstill because of how this matchup works out. It's whoever can draw the most face damage before the other person can. They're going to play a secret. I probably should have checked which secret that would have been, but I'm pretty sure it couldn't have been Counterspell, because they had already triggered the arcane part of their quest. Thus it probably is Ice Barrier. A card that is basically useless in this matchup for them. Not completely useless. But if it was a mirror match, it would be completely useless. And then they're going to play a minion, which allows us to play our removal. We draw into another ignite. You know, on paper, Ignite sounds like a cool card concept, but really it's just annoying for anyone who's playing against it. Because holy shit does it combo off. I'm also starting to realize why I don't record these videos normally at 4 in the morning. Not a good idea. They're going to trade their fire cell away. I don't honestly know how you can hit Questline without hitting Fire Mage as a deck by itself, because I'm pretty sure it's Ignite that's the problem. And we draw into Fire Cell, and we can kill their board. So by not putting out any minions on the board, we're preventing them from probably using First Flame, which prevents them from completing any step of their quest, which prevents them from getting 3 extra damage from their spells. This is honestly probably a really hard matchup for them to think about when it comes to completing their quest in time. So they're just going to shotgun a useless fire cell. Though it probably would have been best for them to keep it, at least until we played our Chandelier. We're going to play Incanter's Flow, and then just play our Fireball. I'm waiting so we can actually combo out with at least one Ignite and Chandelier before playing the Chandelier. I know we have a lot of fuel for the Chandelier, but I'm kind of being a little bit greedy. We're going to play the Incanter's Flow, and then the Hot Streak, drawing into Arcane Intellect, and drawing into Antonidas, which is great. And now we're just going to damage our Chandelier a little bit. Keep on drawing those cards. And here I'm debating if I want to heal my Chandelier with the Brain Freeze or not. And I'm just going to do it so they can't complete Frost part of the request. Though, next turn we win no matter what if they don't play some type of minion. And here they generate a minion, but they're going to damage it themselves. Are they going to kill the minion? Yeah. But who would have thought Antonidas would actually be ran in any deck right now? This card is honestly a great finisher for this deck. It's online a lot more often than you'd expect. Now that we're through the games, let's discuss how well the deck did and why I built the deck the way I did. So the deck performed pretty well. It does demonstrate that there is a third archetype that a lot of people are ignoring for Mage right now, which is Fire Mage. However, this deck is so close to just being Questline Mage that honestly you could almost make a Questline Mage variant of this deck and it would probably be better than this deck. However, I wanted to do something with Sanctum's Chandelier instead of focusing on the quest, since in a quest deck you want to minimize the amount of minions that you're running to probably actually running 0. And this deck runs actually quite a few minions for a mage deck. It also runs Grand Magus Antonidas just because I wanted to use the card, and it turned out it was actually a pretty alright card to finish off the game whenever you needed a big Hail Mary of a turn. However, I think the card might be a little bit too slow on average and isn't necessary to even run this deck. But it is a cool little inclusion that you can run in it, and it is supposed to be the big payoff for Fire Mage as a deck. So originally I tried to include Gadgetzan Auctioneer in the deck, but it proved to be a little bit too much draw power that relied on you casting a bunch of spells. So I ended up cutting it out just for the Chandelier, since most of the spells in your deck are actually fire spells and it doesn't really matter that much. If it weren't for the quest line being as strong as it is, I'm pretty sure Fire Mage would probably be the variant of Mage that was the most meta devastating at the given moment. But because the quest line is so good and it can also run Ignite, everyone's going to center around that deck instead. However, I think this variant holds some merits too, just because of the fact that you can actually draw into Ignite a lot more often than you would ever think would be humanly possible. When you combo it off with Chandelier and some of the other draw power cards in the deck, or even cards such as Incanter's Flow, which reduce the card's cost in your deck, this is also a card that really shouldn't have been printed. It's always going to be a problem unless they completely gut the card, and with the recent changes in Blizzard policies when it comes to balancing decisions, I don't think they're ever going to purposely gut any type of card. Even if it's a common, it feels bad when you gut a card, and honestly, I prefer this style of nerfing compared to the old. But doesn't change the fact that this card is broken as hell and is devastating to play against. Fire Cell was a card that was honestly very shockingly good in this deck. I get it, it's a board clear, should have realized it's good with a bunch of aggro decks running around. However, the reason why it's good is because it has tradable on it. You can trade it away late game so you can draw into Ignite, thus doing a bunch of more damage to your opponent's face. It's amazing how often that actually came up within the games. There were a few cards that felt awkward in the deck, however, it's not the card that you would assume would have been, which is Grand Magus Antonidas. Most of the time, you would assume this card would be too high cost for it ever to pay off, or the fact that you would need 3 turns in order to set it up. But because you are shuffling Ignite into your deck so often and drawing a bunch of cards in your deck, it was actually really easy to set off. A card like Astromancer kind of felt awkward in the deck, just because it lowered the possibility of refreshing your mana crystals from refreshing Spring Water, thus making this card kind of awkward to use in the deck. But you need so much draw power that it's worth including in the deck. But it definitely is a card that I would cut over Grand Magus Antonidas, because Antonidas actually won me games. I don't think Astromancer ever won me a game in this deck. Sure, it might have gave me an extra card off of Cram Session, but I don't think the Prime actually ever did anything meaningful to one of my opponents. Could be wrong, but it didn't come up often. I don't know what card you would replace with this card. Probably some type of cheap spell. But you're already running most of the cheap spells in this deck that you wouldn't want to run in this style of deck anyways. So, to be honest, it's kind of hard to make a decision of what to run over it and what not to. That's why it ended up getting included, since it does have a pretty nice stat line and does give you an extra card so you don't go into fatigue if somehow both of your ignites get destroyed. With that being said, if you wanted an alternative to Questline Mage and you wanted a deck with a similar playstyle to old Miracle decks, this is honestly not a bad deck to make. Now, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment down below, subscribe, and like the video. And until next time, bye-bye.